Hello and welcome, I'm Tefera Gedamu. Kenya faces a wave of terrorist attacks. Our close neighbor Yemen is up in flames. What is the degree of preparedness in this sub-region like? My guest today, Abdul Mohammed, is a seasoned analyst. A very warm welcome to the program, Abdul.
Thank you.
As usual.
Thank you very much.
You come over and join me on the show when some interesting things happen. Not interesting, devastating things also happen in our neighborhood, including, not only in Africa, not only in the Horn of Africa and so on, but also like in the Middle East. Iraq is up in Syria and Iraq are up in flames. You have Yemen following. You have ISIS coming into the picture. When was it? A little over a year ago.
Exactly.
And so on. That's a very gruesome picture.
Thank you, Tefera, for having me. I think you started well. I think we need our proximity to the Middle East.
And that's where it's very important.
Exactly. The Horn of Africa's proximity to the Middle East compels us to comprehend this gigantic phenomena that's happening in the entire greater Middle East.
It evolved very, very fast in the last 30 years.
Evolved extremely fast, and it has not yet stopped. And I think what is at stake in the Middle East today is basically the survival of nation states that were formed after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire by the French and the British. So this survival and collapse of the nation states is having wider implications. It is instigating sectarian violence between the Shia and Sunni.
But which is more complex than that? I mean, you cannot put those into different boxes.
But a couple of things. One is this sectarian strife. Number two, the Middle East, especially Syria and Iraq, used to be a place where minorities thrived. There are some of the oldest Christian communities who speak still Aramaic, the language of Christ, are now under threat. And then it is unleashing.
You even have Jewish enclaves and so on.
Enclaves and all of that. So all of that is now, the survival of all these communities is at stake. And the secular state that was established during the Arab nationalist movement is also collapsing. The undemocratic secular state is also collapsing. So, and this phenomena has not yet ended. And what you also need to take into account is the kind of a crisis that is taking place in the Middle East is partly instigated by non-state actors, terrorist groups, non-state actors that are internationalist in their outlook, which means they export the crisis. They will not confine it to the Middle East. They will export it. So when you consider all of that, then we really need to be on top of the Middle East crisis in a manner that we will mitigate some of its effect into our region.
Who are these actors? I mean, you said non-state actors. I know you're talking about ISIS and also
Al-Qaeda, ISIS, different militias, and different militias under different Islamic names, but it is not the most brutal. The most brutal and the most ruthless is ISIS group.
How did it evolve?
Well, just before that, I think
it's not like they are Syrians and Iraqis alone.
I think what we need to understand is the following. One is the terrorist organizations have evolved. The initial incubation for terrorism was the original jihadists who went to Afghanistan. When Afghanistan was invaded by the Soviet Union at that time, there was a call to defend this Islamic land. And that call was supported and financed by Saudi Arabia and by the CIA. So they went there. This is the first generation of jihadists. The second generation of the extremist jihadists, were those who came out of Afghanistan as Al-Qaeda. And they were particularly elitist group, upper middle class kids who were more interested in spectacular attacks especially against American interests. So these were the second generation of terrorists, the Al-Qaeda, and in some ways Al-Shabaab is an offshoot of that. And the third generation
in the U.S. they started with the World Trade Center, and they ended up with the World Trade Center.
Exactly. And the third generation are these ISIS groups, and the ISIS group comes out of the particular history and phenomena of Iraq and Syria. And they come out of the consequence of the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Therefore, they are a combination of Al-Qaeda, offshoot from Al-Qaeda group, and the Saddam Hussein army, which were dismantled and dispersed, so disfranchised. So they came together to form these ISIS groups, and lately the jihadist Western jihadists joined them. So this third generation are peculiar. They are highly organized, highly resourced, very modern organization. So the danger they pose, not only to the Middle East, but to the larger, area, including the Horn of Africa, should not be underestimated.
And they have redefined terrorism, if you will.
They have redefined terrorism, they upgraded it, they qualitatively much more different than the first generation. But in all of this, I don't want to be misunderstood. There are Western commentators who basically try to link this terrorist phenomena with Islam, as if it is intrinsic to Islam. It is not. It is a modern phenomenon. Okay, it's a modern phenomenon, just like, for example, the French Revolution, which started to establish the first secular state, was very violent. Very violent. As a matter of fact, 17,000 people, men, women, and children, were beheaded during the French Revolution. During the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, the Turks, unleashed massive, displacement, ethnic cleansing of Armenians. The Khmer Rouge, the Russian Revolution, all of these are spectacularly violent sides to them.
So that kind of understanding, I would say, is a little bit too extreme.
Yeah.
Although that almost exclusively, all this, the people who make up this are Muslims, of course.
Yeah.
But it's not like
all of these are modern phenomena that could be traced to the past 100 to 100 years. So it doesn't go deep into the history of the religion. So it's not intrinsic. Every religion has its violent moment, and it shows you that every religion is susceptible, to political influences. So these are the consequences.
So basically, we are near this flash points of crisis of every magnitude, every form, and every shape that's happening in the Middle East. How is this affecting us, and are we ready as a continent for that? Because I want you to go to explore this in light of what's happening in Yemen and so on.
Very good. Yemen worries me a great deal.
Why would it worry you?
Because it worries me a great deal because the crisis now has entered a period where fragmentation is taking place rapidly. Therefore, it is a full-fledged civil war in the making with an external dimension. And Yemen is too close to us, both historically, culturally, and all of that. Therefore, the ability of the Yemen crisis to be exported to our region is very high. And so we need to be very mindful on how to contain it. On the other hand, there are already incubated terrorist groups like Al-Shabaab operating in the Horn of Africa.
How is it linked to that Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula?
Al-Shabaab, historically, Al-Shabaab is rooted in the collapse of the Somali state. When the Somali state collapsed, it created two trends. One is warlords, and the other is revivalist, is Islamicist. The warlords were dominant for a long time. And the Islamicist, the revival Islamicist, mutated from Al-Ittihad type of social movement into purely
very powerful, if you will, in the
1980s. But then out of that emerged the Al-Shabaab, which is purely military organization that imitates and affiliated with others. It started imitating Al-Qaeda. Now they are started imitating Boko Haram and by extension ISIS. And the recent attack in Garissa as actually is an attempt not to be upstaged by Boko Haram and the others. They want to say we are also still around. And the target they chose in northeastern Somalia, Garissa, is carefully selected. And the school they attacked is also very carefully selected. It's a soft target, but carefully selected, because Garissa is a place where multi-ethnic and multi-religious students are studying. So while in Somalia they attack Muslims, in Garissa they chose to attack exclusively Christians, and by doing that they want to create a rift, a divide in the Kenyan society, and this is very, very dangerous. And therefore they have to be stopped from doing that. They have to be stopped from imitating Boko Haram, in which they will carve out a territory and start creating a stable territory, you know. So how we are going to respond, how the Kenyan government authorities are going to respond to this phenomenon is going to be very pivotal. There are already calls among certain sectors of this, for understandable reason, of the Kenyan society, saying that non-Muslims should start leaving Garissa and all of these places.
And putting up a fence too, which is ridiculous.
All the fence. This is, you know, this is an understandable reaction, but it is not a proper strategic response. You know, Garissa is very important to remain a multi-ethnic and a multi-religious enclave. It is part and parcel of integrating the northeastern part of Kenya into the larger Kenyan community. If you abandon that, then you will abandon the idea of integrating this backward peripheral part of Somalia. When terrorism attack, how we respond matters.
Right, we'll come back.
Exactly, because the consequences, we have to be mindful of the consequences on how we respond.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they're not like taking the instructions from ISIS in America. No, I mean, although they're not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet, but there is that kind of affinity with them, right?
There is affinity, there is imitation. For example, I think there are ample evidences to show that Boko Haram and Al-Qaeda have been training together, exchanging experiences, etc. Therefore, you know, and the social media, which these terrorist organizations are utilizing, is a form of exchanging experiences, and also they use the same vehicle for recruitment. You know, inspirational, you know, they will try to inspire young people to join them, so they use the same kind of methodology. Therefore, it is part of networking.
The blueprint is there, and that's what they are
The blueprint is there. You learn, and you don't want to be upstaged. They want to, you know, they want to engage in more spectacular, you know, attacks, in more spectacular you know, violence, in order to say to the other guy, I am better than you, or I'm with you, you know. So
but are they terrifying enough? I mean they've created this mess. Look what happened, you know, but it's in quick succession. You know, you have the bus, you know, they've stopped the bus the same direction in Kenya and killed X number of people. Then you have another attempt in a quarry, and they killed workers there, and now you have this Garissa attack happening almost in quick succession.
Exactly.
The terror is continuing, and Kenya is on fire, if you know.
Yeah.
So how you mentioned some of the means that the Kenyan government is employing to be able to stop these kind of attacks from happening again, including, for example, trying to introduce the anti-terrorism law.
How you respond matters. You know, in a situation like this, your response should not be purely military. Okay, you have to have a holistic approach. You have to address the governance challenges that these people prey on. You have to make sure that your response should not stigmatize the entire community. You have to make sure that your capacity should be equally distributed in trying to get the Muslim communities themselves mobilized, to fight this kind of extreme phenomena in their community. So it is a multifaceted approach, is the only one that will eventually succeed. But militarily, they should be contained, they should be isolated, they should be degraded, and eventually eliminated as part and parcel of a societal movement.
So you're talking about...
It is not only government that could respond to this, but also community should be mobilized to respond to it.
So you're talking about a strong counter-terrorism strategy, if you will.
More than just counter-terrorism. Counter-terrorism sometimes is interpreted as only exclusively military.
And intelligence.
Intelligence. This is important, but not decisive. The decisive one is the mobilization of people.
Why is not Ethiopia? Why is Al-Shabaab not attacking Ethiopia?
Oh, they wish. They wish. As a matter of fact, probably their prime target is Ethiopia, but their ability to penetrate, their ability both in terms of mobilizing communities on the Ethiopian side has been systematically curtailed through mobilization, through addressing local grievances, through just systematic attention to the larger community. And also, of course, the intelligence capacity, the military capacity goes hand in hand with this. Otherwise, their primary target would probably have been Ethiopia. So they go for a soft target. And some of these areas in the northeastern part of Kenya becomes a fertile ground because it's not governed. These areas are not governed. They are spaces that non-state actors come and fill. That's why in our region there are a lot of non-governed areas, non-governed space.
You're talking about the Horn of Africa?
The Horn of Africa as a whole.
Region?
Exactly, the region as a whole. Look, the Horn of Africa is very fragile. There are collapsed states. Somalia is trying to recover, but it is essentially collapsed state trying to regain its sovereignty and to regain its state institutions. South Sudan is unfortunately moving in the direction in which they become totally ungovernable very soon unless they make an extra effort to reverse it. Sudan is still in crisis, so we need to make sure that Sudan holds together. So the only country actually in the region that is solidly stable is Ethiopia. And which means Ethiopia has a burden not only to stabilize itself, but also to stabilize the region, because the instability of the region will affect its development, will affect its ability to integrate economically in the region. The other countries, there are, even in the Middle East, there are very few real countries. For example, in the Middle East, I can't think of a country other than Iran that is a real country in terms of society that has evolved historically to be a cohesive country. Most of them are created by colonialism and they are dysfunctional. And in the Horn of Africa, you have the same phenomena. So in the Horn of Africa, really by extension, the two countries that are real capable state, with ability to stabilize not only themselves, but the region as a whole, is Ethiopia and Egypt.
But what are the things that come to your mind when you talk about this kind of leadership?
As a matter of fact, it is, first of all, peace and security is indivisible. You can't have peace and security in your own, in just one country. And you need to have a regional perspective. That's why within IGAD there is at least a rudimentary structure of peace and security that's bringing all the countries together, and the African Union is coming in to support these institutions and bring added value. The intervention of under the auspices of the African Union to stabilize Somalia is by and large a success story, that needs to be built upon. I mean, the problem was so gigantic that it's taking so much time. But Somalia is work in progress, and I think it should be interpreted as a success, but work in progress. What this region needs to do and learn from other regions is that fighting terrorism, fighting destabilizing non-state actors should be a comprehensive strategy, has to be devised. That comprehensive strategy, as I said, includes security and military, is indispensable, but more importantly, it should include governance, establishment of legitimate states that will not be contested. A state that will be able to be representative of the pluralist societies that we Horn of Africans are. Therefore, building a state and building a cohesive, a democratic, representative state, part and parcel of fighting terrorism. And the other thing is, of course, when you have a legitimate state, the possibility for economic development arises. And when economic development takes place, then regional integration will not only be state-driven, but also civil society-driven. For example, because of peace in Ethiopia and in Djibouti, for all practical purposes, both countries are now one economic zone. So this could be duplicated in the Horn of Africa, and the ability now that is exerted by the Horn of African countries to build a network of infrastructures, roads, rails, and all of that is also an extremely important undertakings that cumulatively will end up stabilizing the region. So you don't only fight with security, you also fight by building a legitimate state and also by expanding economic opportunities.
So the future is not bleak, is it?
No. It's well, human beings, we cannot afford to be.
I mean, you travel a lot. You travel a lot to Europe, North America, and so on. So what do immigration officers think about you? What do they think when they see your passport, considering what is happening in our region?
Well, it's not easy these days to travel with the name Mohammed. It's not easy. Unfortunately, the kind of situation that's created, the atmosphere created, is stigmatizing the Muslim population as a whole. And so, when you pass through immigration, you are a suspect until you prove that you are not.
How do you prove that you're not?
You just, when an officer asks for you for specific questions, you just respond. Where you work, your background, and all of that. And usually they take you aside. If you go to New York into an immigration depot, into an immigration site, you only see practically 80–90% of the people who will be given special attentions are Muslims, and that happens to me all the time. Sometimes it gets too much and frustrates you, but overall you have to understand it and respond with it appropriately.
Well, thank you very much for your time as usual. It was a pleasure having you on my show.
Thank you very much, Abdul.